Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of you for being here. And I've only been in the Senate for, well, less than 4 months, but this is the most fascinating 2 hours so far. So thank you all for being as prepared as you are. I'm going to summarize a few things I've heard this morning before I run out of time to do that, and then ask some questions. General Dunford, you said space is no longer a sanctuary. I think Secretary Wilson, you both said it's now contested. Great points, important points. General Hyten, you said there will be a Space Force one day, and I'm going to hone in on that because we hear a lot of reluctance and a lot of questions about the efficiencies, the business model. You've answered them all brilliantly, not necessarily convincingly maybe to some, but I think you've answered those questions very well. Secretary Shanahan, you said something interesting. I want to go through maybe a little history. You said the existing forces are based on a place, on geography. I think it's an important point that sometimes we're missing when we draw parallels between this and other efforts and missions. As you said that, I started thinking about the Air Force itself, that the Air Force wasn't always the Air Force. It was once the Army Air Force, and prior to that was the Army Air Corps, and prior to that there weren't airplanes. That as new domains became contested, we had to lead. I was also thinking about some other proverbs, including Proverbs where it says that without vision, the people perish. I'm pretty sure it was a Minnesota Viking fan that said the logical conclusion of defense is defeat. Being second is not a great place to be, and I know we're first. But I just feel so strongly that if we're going to have a Space Force one day, why wouldn't we start sooner rather than later? Why would we let somebody else get there? And so from a strategic standpoint, and I guess I'd ask the generals first about this, how important is it to have this public kitchen table level discussion? I appreciate your terminology, Secretary Wilson, when you said the President has elevated this topic to a kitchen table level. I think that's exactly right. But our adversaries are watching. They're probably watching this hearing right now. How did China and Russia roll out their space forces or their space activity? Did they do it in a real outward way, or did they try to do it under the radar? Maybe the generals could answer that for me. And is it important, by the way, that we send a message?
Senator, I don't mean to be flippant, but the Russian military and the Chinese military are not typically afforded the opportunity we have been afforded this morning in full transparency with initiatives like this.
And Senator, the Chinese and the Russians both look at space as a critical element of their defensive capabilities as their military. They've also organized differently about space. The Chinese are integrating a lot of their capabilities into a single command, space, counter space, those into a single command. They have an officer responsible for space, an officer responsible for counter space. I'd be glad to talk to you in a different setting about what I think they're doing and what the strengths of what they're doing and the weaknesses are. But I really don't want to talk about that in a public forum.
I appreciate both answers very much. We've had a lot of discussion about cost and benefit, and I understand the concerns of a couple of years or several years of cutbacks that now have us in catch-up mode on readiness and lethalness and all those things that are important. And I appreciate the answer, Chairman Dunford, about this is part of readiness. This is probably essential to readiness. But maybe, Secretary Shanahan, is a cost-benefit analysis, a literal cost-benefit analysis even, is that a possibility here?
No, it is, and implicit in the Space Development Agency is a cost-benefit analysis. It's a twofer. More capability sooner at a lower cost. And that's this is about moving more quickly. I mean, this is a threat-driven response, and it's really not even a response, as I think what the chairman's been highlighting here, is how do we get ahead of things? The other piece here, and we've touched on it briefly is we're about to usher in a new age of technology. I mean, this is, we're on the dawn of some major changes, and if we adapt properly, we'll be able to take advantage of it and, again, increase our dominance in space.
And maybe just the last question for Secretary Wilson, then, with that in mind, I mean, are the increments important? I appreciate what my colleagues are saying about, but what about, why isn't this in the plan, or why isn't that part of the proposal, and, whether it's, the Guard or reserves or other things. And yet, aren't the increments sort of an important part of the rollout? In other words, we're not going from here to here. We see here, but we're going incrementally. Is that not an important part of the strategy?
I'm not sure it's incremental. I do think that, that what we have now is a set of programs that support a strategy to dominate in space. And, we all prefer that space remains peaceful, because everyone loses if war extends into space. But we are developing the capabilities to deter, and if necessary, to fight and win in the space domain as we do in all other domains, so that our adversaries will choose wisely to deal with our diplomats and not with our warfighters. And that's what this is about.
Beautifully said. Thanks to all of you. And I might just wrap up my comments by saying I just don't want to be sitting here 4 years from now and have 4 people look at me and go, I wish we would have started this 4 years ago. With that, I yield.